How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world, and we'd like to tell you about them.
NDC Oslo will be May 21st through the 25th. Go to ndcoslo.com to register.
NDC Copenhagen is happening August 27th through the 31st. Go to ndccopenhagen.com for more information.
NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. The early bird discount for NDC Porto ends July 21st. Go to ndcporto.com to register.
And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com. Hey, welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
I'm very excited, Richard, because one of my heroes of podcasting, Grant Barrett, is going to be with us in just a few minutes. But first, let's do Better Know Framework and get out of the way.
Awesome. All right, man, what do you got?
Believe it or not, I started a new podcast.
Are you kidding?
I'm stupid. I don't know.
We both put several hours of podcasts a week in, so it's not surprising.
Yeah, so this one is more like a personal journal.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just finding people that I've met in my travels and I've worked with that I find really interesting, and I think their stories would be very interesting to my listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's called No Excuse for Boredom.
I love it.
It's at noexcuseforboredom.com.
I can't believe you got that domain name.
I know.
It's a great domain name.
I have a way with getting domain names. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep. noexcuseforboredom.com. So there's only 2 episodes up there. The first one is Dan Grief. He's a guy from England who I know you don't know, but
nope.
I basically talked to him about the difference between New England and Old England in terms of language and slang. And Grant, you probably like this too.
That'd be hilarious.
I asked him to define a whole bunch of British slang words and phrases that confused me when I first heard them.
Like?
Okay. Are you trying to take the piss out of me?
Yeah. The classic. Yeah.
The only time I ever heard that was like on a Gordon Ramsay show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? I kind of got from the context that it means like, are you kidding with me? Or are you just trying to pull a fast one or whatever? But I never heard it before. So there's just a long list.
Yeah, there's something very catheter-esque about that.
It really, I know.
They put in a stent.
Yeah, exactly. I just didn't get it. So it's just funny. And then the second one is with Randy Judkins.
Oh man, I remember him.
Yeah, my friend
back in the early days.
My friend from Maine who did that first .NET, what is .NET video, and he's a juggler, magician, comedian.
He was so funny too.
Oh, had me rolling in stitches. All right, well, enough of that. That's what I got. Who's talking to us today, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1605, the one we did back in 2018, so that's a while ago. And it was actually about IoT and edge computing, but we were and this is Jared Rhodes we were talking to. I don't know if you remember this, because of course you remember every show. It was only 5 years ago. Wait, oh no, that's me. But the latter half of the show, we were talking about data collection a lot because we were talking about how small the hardware got and you could put it just about anywhere. It'll run on nothing. It's always uploaded to the cloud. There's consequences to all of that. And Mike, comment on the show, and admittedly he commented, within a month of it being published, so several years ago. He said, "Hey, this is a great ethical discussion about collecting data. I always revert back to Kranzberg's first law of tech. It is neither good or bad, nor is it neutral." I think, I don't think that's actually his quote, but okay. I don't disagree with the quote. Mentoring a store gathering data is troubling. You obviously opt in, and this is when we were talking about some of the projects I've been involved with where they're actually instrumenting shelves to see what you look at, what you pick up, what you put down, all of those kinds of things. And so the point of you obviously opt in by seeing the monitor continue to enter, but is that enough? Shouldn't the customer know to what extent their behavior will be analyzed and for what purpose? What are the patrons who, beyond their control, only have access to that store? Are you now alienating their business and taking advantage of the system system to gather data. Programming ethics have always fascinated me. Recent protests by Google employees. Now, again, 2018.
Yeah. Right.
And that was when Google was going into China and they were demanding the Great Firewall stuff and censoring and so forth. Recent protests by Google employees over developing censoring products for the Chinese government and the military machine learning for the U.S. government highlight the backlashes these companies face when adopting technologies for different applications. And I'm like, man, 5 years later and there's no protest.
Yeah.
And we're
What's
more
going on
than
here?
ever. But it always boils down to this. You will be able to find a developer to do what you want to have done. There will always be someone with the ethics that align to yours or one desperate enough to do that work. This isn't unique to programming, however. Programming has a unique advantage to being cheap to scale. So one developer can have a profound impact on humanity versus one unethical police officer or one unethical investor. Had Bernie Madoff, I love this reference, had Bernie Madoff known how to make an ASP.NET website, he could have offered his services anonymously to many more people. It's always a great discussion on what to do about this responsibility. How do companies talk about this? My experience is most don't.
They don't. Yeah.
But we will eventually need to.
Yeah. Wow. Makes you think.
Mike, you killed it. I was so glad to find this comment as I dug through knowing where we were going to go today. And, so thanks for this. It is absolutely the conversations we need to have and are having. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it in the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And definitely follow us on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot. Rudy toot toot.
Still funny.
Yeah, it's still funny. Okay.
We're still in grade 7.
I know. I'm always going to be that way. Well, this is a really exciting time to have Grant Barrett on the show because I think Grant exists in the intersection of language and ethics and tech. So let me read his bio for you. Away with Words, waywardradio.org, co-host and co-producer Grant Barrett is an American lexicographer and linguist specializing in slang and new words. The public radio show is heard from coast to coast in the United States. It's waywardradio.org/radio and around the world by podcast, waywardradio.org/podcast. He has helped produce dozens of dictionaries and has authored 3 books of his own. He's a voracious reader, reads and speaks a bit of French and Spanish, and spent years working in the jargon-rich jungles of information technology. Though born and raised in Missouri and having been a longtime resident of New York City, Grant now lives in San Diego, California with his wife, also a linguist and lexicographer, and their young son. His personal website is grantbarrett.com. Welcome, Grant.
Hello. How you doing? Thanks
Hey.
for reading the bio and the URLs.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just got to say your podcast is a staple in my house.
You know, it's a radio show, too, heard coast to coast in the United States, as you just read.
Yes, you're right. And also independently, voraciously independent, right?
Yeah, not a part of NPR, but heard on a lot of NPR stations. It's hard to explain that to people, but it's a tiny little nonprofit. The radio stations are clients of ours. So we just,
Nice.
So cool.
I talk to the radio station.
Because you have an NPR sound.
Well,
You could easily be NPR.
yeah, we are on NPR stations, so we take the NPR sound, but we were just added to a bunch of new stations, Miami and Tucson, and actually we're now heard in Roswell, New Mexico.
Wow.
The aliens are tuned in.
The aliens are listening. Excellent.
Is the color there?
Yeah, let me tell you where that comes from. You know, Beetlejuice? Yeah, that's the...
Great movie. All right. So the reason that I got in touch with you is because I was listening to your show and Martha read a story or a comment or an anecdote about she went to ChatGPT and told it to give her a 1-paragraph description of Away with Words. And it came up with this, what she thought was a completely unique paragraph. She said she Googled each one of them, one of the sentences, and they could not be found elsewhere on the internet. And then started this moral discussion about, there's people who are really afraid of this, all right, of ChatGPT and of language evolving in general. And I think one of you, maybe it was you, said that, well, back in the days of what was it, Socrates or ancient Greece, they were concerned that if they if they educated people and books, people were writing books, obviously they weren't writing, printing books, but if they were writing, that was going to make people stupider because they wouldn't have to remember so much.
Yeah. At the time, in the ancient Greeks, you were expected to memorize and recite aloud. And once writing became more standard, you might put it on a sheepskin, or vellum or papyrus. People are like, wait a second, you're not memorizing this? You're just going to go and read it? It's not in your head? How do you actually know anything?
Right.
If you just know where to get it, that's not knowledge. It's stored out of your brain.
You got to think that was a technological advance, that better writing implements had come along. You weren't chiseling in stone or pressing in clay. And
well, it's the evidence that every technological advance has a resisting force. There's always opposition.
This was the same screaming match that happened when Gutenberg made the press.
Well, everything. All technological advance has pushback. There's not a one. Mm-hmm. I mean, somebody probably argued against fire. It burns. Somebody
stuff's going to hurt you. Nothing good will come of it.
Somebody argued against the wheel. But wait, it doesn't have a stopping point. It can just keep going. How will I know that when I go to sleep, it'll still be there in the morning?
Yeah, right.
Just roll away.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's circular. That's satanic. I don't know.
We can't trust people with new technology. I think that's what it comes down to, right? And that's why people...
But on a larger point, what's funny about this is, since we've booked this interview for the three of us to talk, the larger conversation has continued as fast as all the GPT outgrowths and companies. And I mean, how many companies were founded in Delaware since it's all exploded,
no kidding.
So much of this conversation has moved on since we just booked this interview.
That's right.
And since Martha and I talked about it on the air, I think the way to discuss this isn't necessarily from an ethical standpoint so much as it is from a personal standpoint. It's Martha took her approach was really interesting as a former magazine writer. So she wrote for Glamour and she wrote for the Washington Post and some other things. She just said, well, if I was still in the trenches, what's to stop my competitor from taking all of my gigs and using this to write rough drafts and then tuning them up a little bit and turning them in and beating me to every deadline, taking all of the greatest gigs and nobody being the wiser? I mean, now we know that there are tools that can help detect the GPT-derived, articles.
Yeah, but that's today.
Yeah.
She's got a good point.
Yeah, except the quality's really not that good. Like, is it ultimately saving you time? I'm not even convinced.
Well, that's the question. You still have, like I said, you have to tune it still, right? I mean, what if your machine learning was based on your own writing and not the larger world?
Yeah.
Then it's only going to be as smart as you and invariably not as.
Right. What if it was a two-step process? The first draft was just from the larger ChatGPT, and the second draft said, now run it through the corpus of my own writing. So it sounds like me.
Yeah. I read an interesting opinion, I think it was in Washington Post, about from a teacher who said teachers need not worry about AI. And the pushback was, there's a simple solution. Just make tests in person or even oral exams.
Yeah, handwriting.
Yeah, handwriting or, Oh, you mentioned that things have progressed. I've noticed that there's a WordPress ChatGPT plugin now.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's going to work well.
All the SEO animals love this crap, right? How many crappy SEO blogs are we going to see with this? Where they're just going to lard them up with Google ads.
Ugh.
Well, they were doing that anyway. I
know, but now more and easier.
Yeah.
I would wonder if it'll actually be better.
I don't know.
Because it might actually be worse.
So I want to talk about, we're at a bridging point here where there's a before and an after. But I wanted to talk about and compare this to another bridging point. I went back to school as an older student in his 20s, and I went to Columbia University to get a degree. And I was right there at the point where universities weren't really decided whether or not laptops should be allowed in all classrooms. So this was 2000. And I was at Columbia University, and I have horrific handwriting. So I had one professor who allowed me to take my exams on a laptop. And a number of the other students were kind of resentful of this. But most students didn't even have a laptop in class to take notes. But now it is really standard to have a laptop in class to take notes.
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulty is you don't know what a student is doing unless you can see their screen.
Yeah.
And now the difficulty is that we saw a lot of this during the pandemic. The difficulty is if you're taking an exam remotely, you have to lock it down. There's all this software and all these businesses that are designed to track eye movement and mouse movement. And they'll even pan the room with your camera to know what else and who else is in the room. So we've kind of leaped this whole thing where it's just assumed you have a laptop. And now they're worried about the laptop doing too much rather than should it even be in the room.
I have friends who are professors who say you have no idea how rampant cheating is. Like, it's unbelievable.
No doubt. And it's funny because there's another bridge point that I want to talk about when we talk about technology kind of going from, oh my God, this is a problem, to, of course it's here. And I think ChatGPT and things like this, all this machine learning will go, of course it's here. We'll just at some point wonder and laugh about this panic. I remember as an IT guy, I was largely on the support side for ad agencies and publishing companies. I remember teaching people to use the internet.
Right.
Where we went from a completely unnetworked office with standalone computers on desks. And at the most networking we had was maybe to a printer, to hooking up email for the first time. And people going, what am I going to use this for?
Yeah, why would I use this? What does this do?
I don't know anybody outside the office. What's an email address? Why does it have this @ symbol? Can I put another symbol there instead? I don't like the @ symbol. Lots of stuff like that. One woman printing out all of her emails and filing them because she's with a little. She's like, things like that.
I had an employee that did that.
Emails actually almost dépassé.
Yep.
Emails kind of like people like, I don't email. Who uses email anymore? So
I don't know. I make notes in my contacts now of what's the primary medium this person likes.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to reach
God
them?
help us. I wish we had email as the primary one still.
It's not true.
I
Some
know.
are.
I wish. I have 15 different ways to reach people. I don't know which one. But anyway, I just want to talk about this. Instead of getting this moral panic and an ethical panic, really let's talk about this as an inflection point. And we've seen these, whether it's moving from speaking or memorizing our knowledge versus writing it down, whether it's should we have laptops in the classroom versus having them in the expecting them in the classroom, to should we have email and to expecting to have email. There's all these different times in history where technology has gone from, oh my God, this is scary, to, of course we have this. This isn't scary at all. And I think that's where we are with this.
So I know that you are one of your things on Way with Words is that you are very much always trying to talk people off the ledge of being like, grammar Nazis and usage Nazis. And you're like,
That's
look,
right.
Language is changing. You need to change with it. It's not, the world isn't going to stop and change for you.
But that does not excuse figuratively and literally. Like, I'm not okay with that.
Calm yourself.
Yeah. See, this is exactly why. Right. So yeah, you're like, look, it's changing, and people wonder how these things work back in time. How did something turn into something else? And you guys do the research. You're like, well, it's because, maybe you can give me a better example, but it happens, it changes, and it's often based on misunderstandings, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's just natural where one category that was broad becomes specific. For example, girl used to mean boy.
Right. How is that weird? I mean,
yeah.
Well, because it was more general. It could mean a young person in general,
Right.
Or so sometimes the broad topic. One of my favorite ones to talk about is how the very specific psychotherapy term of anal retentive now just means, they're particular. So it left a specific domain where it was very precise in this profession to be used in everyday language by people who are not, they're not professional at all.
Do you find an author who used that phrase in some kind of popular media that then it became part of the regular lexicon?
It wasn't one; it was many. The things often leave their specific police jargon. Often leaves. For example, it'll leave the specific language of the police and show up in hip hop, and then it becomes slang in the street.
Right.
So a lot of times the bridge there is some kind of contact, but it usually requires repeated contact and not one point of contact.
So I guess given all that history of you and Martha, Are you a little more scared with AI than the rest of us are? Or are you like, is this just falling into, this is just another inflection point and don't worry and never...
Yeah, I think it's another inflection point. And, I think on the segment we aired on the show, I can't remember how it ended up when we edited it. I think I specifically said, I want to avoid the term AI. I don't believe this is AI. I think it's just machine learning.
Right.
And,
it is.
And to call it AI has a lot of the AI we've been calling AI for decades isn't AI. Right. It's just sophisticated conditionals.
Yep.
The way I've been describing it is artificial intelligence is what you call something when it doesn't work. As soon as it does work, it'll get a new name.
Yeah. Well, although I think that some of the stupid things it's producing are just as stupid as humans. So maybe it's AI. I don't know.
Potentially stupider.
Yeah, potentially stupider.
The opposite of artificial intelligence is natural stupidity, right?
Yeah. Although, it's a ton of operator error from what I'm seeing. A lot of the stupid results are just because the operators don't know what the hell they're doing.
Why are you having existential debates with a search engine?
Right. We all saw the one where we're all laughing like the guy who wrote this very ponderous piece. What's that? The Washington Post. We're like, dude, you're like completely you're treating it like an entity. It's literally every single time you ask it a question, it's only, it doesn't have a brain. You're acting like it has a brain.
It's software.
But here's the thing, though. Companies are going to get dinged for these things representing them in ways they don't want to be represented.
Yeah.
So this has just happened with Bing, right? Microsoft. They basically allowed open-ended discussions with their AI. And what happens, they've noticed, is after maybe 20 iterations of back and forth on the same subject, the bot starts to lose its you-know-what.
Now, I now know why I actually was able to talk to some folks on the inside.
Yeah.
Because it's a software problem. It's a bug.
Interesting.
Oh, like a bug or like a solvable bug?
It is solvable, but they solved it by not hitting the limits. Look, this whole mechanism is about context.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So your parser reads what you've written and it tokenizes it so that it knows how to respond to it.
Right.
And it puts it in a cache. So the next thing, then it writes a response, which is also tokenized. Then you write your next response. In order to maintain context, it tokenizes that. Then it reads them all together and creates a response. Eventually, you overflow the cache.
Oh, so you've got too many layers of recursive tokenizing.
That's right. You just run out of room. They've only allocated so much space for tokens.
This is why I love you, Grant. You get it.
Well,
the oldest tokens fall off the back, and the oldest tokens are typically the ones shaping things.
Yeah, because you need that umbrella thought, because a lot of times your first question sets your umbrella. Your umbrella, yeah.
The best demonstration I've done of this is I fired up ChatGPT. It says, only talk to me in iambic pentameter. and then just chat away with it, and at some point, it forgets.
I love when you give it rules, and it follows
like
those
a 4-year-old.
Right.
Yeah.
I told you not to talk to me.
But you want to know what the limits of the cache are, put key instructions at the beginning of the cache.
But to get back to the Bing thing, this chatbot kept insisting to New York Times reporter Kevin Roose, I guess, that he didn't actually love his wife and said that it would like to steal nuclear secrets. And okay, but it's a bot. It's not going to steal. There was another situation where somebody, and one of our RDs actually convinced the bot that, 15 plus 3 equaled 21. Yeah, and the bot said, yes, I'm sorry, you are right. 15 plus 3 equals 21. And then I, to test it, went back and asked it, what's 15 plus 3? And it said 18.
Yeah, because it didn't remember the previous conversation, because that's not how it's spelled. It doesn't have the context from all the other conversations it's had with all these other people. It only has its context from you.
Because when it does combine all the context, you end up with Tay.
Okay, you got to explain that.
Right. The original, the Tay was the original Microsoft bot going back in 2018, which within 10 hours had turned into a racist psychopath because it was combining everything that people were throwing at it.
Right.
Yeah, and they were testing its limits. There were tons of edge cases. It wasn't.
When they took it down, and I'm still not convinced they're not going to take this down.
I'm not convinced either, and I don't. Mm-hmm. I think it's a wonderful experiment. I think it's an experiment on the people using it as much as on the software itself.
I wonder how much of this is almost another kind of Stanford experiment.
Yeah, maybe.
How lonely are people that they're having these conversations?
I want to tackle this from another angle as well. You know what this also reminds me of? A lot of the complaints about Mechanical Turk.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
When people were talking about what happens when you put all this effort out to people to automate stuff, pennies on the task.
Right.
And I've done that. And actually, one of my other lives, one of the reasons I do the radio show was as a dictionary editor. So I actually did a paper for the Dictionary Society of North America and presented it. What happens when you ask people on Mechanical Turk to write dictionary entries? And so I found a bunch of fairly common words that weren't in any major dictionary, and I created a bunch of tasks. And first I had people find sample sentences, use these words, and then I had another whole bunch of people use those sample sentences to approximate a dictionary style entry. And then I had another batch of people trim them down and make them look like actual dictionary entries with parts of speech. And it actually worked pretty well.
Wow.
It was more expensive than having an actual dictionary editor do it. And now I have a paper proposal before that same dictionary society to see what ChatGPT does. And I'm also going to use Stable Diffusion or a variety of some other AI image generator to create dictionary-style illustrations for those definitions. So we're going to see if I can't scare the lexicographers.
Nice.
That's great.
Because it does bang up against the plagiarism aspect, too. Like,
It
I
really
appreciate
does.
that Martha did that work to check all the sentences. But just because you scrape something off the web and run it through a synonym engine, doesn't make it original work.
Right.
It just doesn't search well.
Yeah, because it's even though it's not good text that it generates, it's plausible.
Right.
Yes. No, it's definitely a Dunning-Kruger amplifier. If you know nothing about a subject, all this stuff looks great.
Well, that's Wikipedia.
Well, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love going to Wikipedia and finding something that's been in there for years that I know is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. I go to Wikipedia for the footnotes. It gives me interesting places to go look for information. It's not information itself.
Well, that's the researcher's attitude. I go find a paper and I look at its bibliography, and suddenly I know the path to become an expert on a thing.
Sure. You at least know what those authors thought was important, whether they found it.
Or at least you know what other papers they pillaged for bibliographies.
Right. So another point of inflection that you guys talked about on the show and still talk about quite a bit is texting language, and how, people are afraid because kids have their phones in their hand, their heads down in their phones, and
but we don't talk about it that much anymore.
But you talked about that book, and I went and read the book, Because Internet. Is that it?
Yeah, by Gretchen McCulloch. It's a fantastic book. It's one of the best books written on internet language ever. It's being used in classrooms now. That's how good it is.
It's awesome. And the basic tenet is, look, this is definitely changing the language. Lol is a word now. It's not just Land O'Lakes.
Yeah, it's in context. Yeah, and it doesn't mean lots of love. It depends on the context, but it's context sensitive. The reason I said we don't talk about texting language is for some people that in their mind, it's just these very specific things like BRB or LOL or OMG, but there's so much more to it. And Gretchen gets into that about all these different ways that we express emphasis and laughter and sarcasm or community or insiderness or outsiderness and hesitation. There's just so much more to it. There's so many more layers. And what you think of as an error may have a message attached to it. Lack of capitalization or punctuation may have a point. And you need to understand that. But what's really important is that, again, the moral panic about what does it all mean when people don't capitalize and punctuate their text messages has vanished.
Right.
It's mostly gone.
Yeah.
And what we discovered was that people really do care about their speech. And then when we all moved from those bar phones we only had T9 entry of our text messages and went to touch phones with haptic response with full keyboards, and we could finally type whole sentences. We did.
Right.
Most of us do. Most of us type the best that we can.
But then we also were brought in a chart of emojis of ever expanding emojis.
Yeah. And those actually have expanded our ability to communicate.
They're the new hieroglyphs.
Well, but they're necessary. There's something I talk about, and I don't have given this presentation in a while, but the version of it that I'll give to you is there's something called paralinguistic restitution. The vocal version of speech is speech. The written version is only a pale imitation of what we speak aloud. Mm-hmm. And it'll never catch up with the spoken version. ever.
Wow.
And so we're constantly trying to make the written version accommodate all the things we can do with our spoken language. And it really never catches up. But paralinguistic restitution is what we do when we make things like emoji, or when we make things like emoticons, or when we do clever little things with punctuation. It's when we're adding back in gestures by making a smiley face, or we're adding back in a grimace by putting the right emoji in there.
Still, I never felt older than when my teenager came up to me and said, #I'm hungry.
Yeah, I don't know about old, but I've always thought, you don't have to say hashtag.
You don't have to say hashtag.
It's okay.
And also,
Every
when
emotion
there's
is
no
a
word
hashtag.
following it, when it's just the hash symbol, it's not a hashtag. It has to have a word following it. So just stop that.
Yeah.
You can call it a hash. You can call it a
All
number
right. So
sign.
there are some things that really bug Grant Barrett. This is good to know.
A few.
What are some of the others?
I'm not telling.
Come on.
Nice.
You have to listen to all 500 episodes.
Well, I have.
I appreciate that.
I just don't remember them.
I feel sorry for you. Who made you do that?
No, me. I did it on my own.
Like when he was in prison, they didn't play like Guns N' Roses at full volume. They played our show.
Nice. Guy's made 2,000 plus podcasts. He does not recommend listening through the whole back catalog, but he does it himself anyway.
Oh,
It's its own kind of OCD.
so those are prison bars I see in the background there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I got to interrupt for one moment for this very important message.
You know, Amazon AWS is a great home for your .NET applications. Whether you're looking to run your apps as serverless functions, have them run in containers, or you require the complete flexibility of virtualized hardware, you can do it all on AWS. .NET toolkits and templates guide you through build and deployment, or you can use your favorite infrastructure as code and CI/CD tools, including Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, and GitLab CI/CD. Loving Visual Studio, VS Code, or Rider? There's an AWS toolkit for each of them. Want to use familiar Microsoft SQL Server databases? You can with the Amazon Relational Database Service, which provides fully managed SQL Server databases that offer automatic scaling, failover, and snapshots. Once your .NET application is deployed, it can use any of the over 200 AWS services to extend its functionality. Interested in AI, IoT, machine learning, video processing, or transcription? Your .NET on AWS application can do it all. To learn more, go to aws.amazon.com/net.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Yo.
Talking to our fellow podcaster, Grant Barrett, who's also a lexicographer. And I didn't really think that lexicographers were that much fun.
It's lexicographer, if you want
a
to say
lexicographer?
Yeah.
I mean, well, you're okay with
Bastardization of languages.
Yeah.
You're in good company, though. The very first radio interview I ever did was with an Australian station promoting my first book, and the guy called me a lexicographer the whole time. And
Lexicographer?
Yeah, when you're doing a live radio interview, you just don't correct people. It's like correcting your father at the dinner table. You just don't do it.
All right, so we're not going to learn the other pet peeves unless you listen to Away with Words. But certainly this sort of inflection point, as you call it, is really interesting, especially for programmers, because this, for years, other people have been looking at us as programmers as people that are replacing their jobs, right? We automate. That's our job, to write automation software to make who do those jobs either less brain dependent, push the button, or eliminate them altogether. I mean, that's the perception. I'm not saying it's true. I would say that software has increased the number of available jobs and changed those jobs from sort of menial tasks to things that have meaning.
But they're new jobs, and it requires
jobs.
some people to retrain. And if they don't want to retrain, that's on them.
But now the shoe's on the other foot. Now programmers are like, oh my God, ChatGPT, you can tell it to write a program that does X and it'll just spit it out. Might not be right, but I've actually used it. And, how do I do that little thing again? And I asked it. And for the most part, it works, but sometimes it doesn't.
I gotta totally do that because I'm the worst. The most programming I know is a little bit of Perl scripting, a little bit of Python, and mainly I just like.
Yeah, but you ran an Exchange server.
I have all these crap scripts that I do my little work with.
But you ran Exchange, and this is where you and Richard have common bond.
Yeah, we both know pain.
Oh God. I did pain, but also I got to work with. I actually loved like things like Cisco servers. Blocking everything coming in with a Cisco.
The original iOS.
It was just nice. It was just nice just to see all that stuff bounced back and never enter your network. Just watch those logs, and you're like, "I did it. I did it." all that intrusion not showing up in my network. Sweet.
It is interesting that programmers now are feeling that existential dread of, ChatGPT kind of taking their jobs. It's not just an inflection point. I want to emphasize that point about it being a bridge. I've had the good fortune to be on a lot of different bridge points in history. For example, when I worked in newspapers, I bridged the print paste up era where you actually pasted up the paper and then shot it with a camera. That's how you went to press, to the digital era where you did it all on a Mac SE with a floppy disk and PageMaker. And I remember going to the press, and there was a guy working in the press room who was very disgruntled that I was taking his job because we were doing it on a Mac and we weren't doing it the old-fashioned way where we used a linotype machine to output the pages. It was this giant thing that involved chemicals and this weird custom keyboard. And he was very angry about it, that his job was gone. There's all of these technological innovations. Somebody's going to get shifted. But if they can't keep up, it's on them. That's how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, I want to have some compassion for, you're going to need to be retrained.
Yeah.
But I also believe in the growth model here. When we brought the web into travel, we eliminated a lot of travel agents, but we actually grew the overall travel business so much. There's many more jobs than the ones that were eliminated. I just don't think that getting ChatGPT to find some code for you to use is that different from you Googling it or Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
It's the same gig. It's just like now you're doing it in a different context, but
and
not by far.
I think it shifts the low end of the business. It shifts the entry level business. And maybe that's the larger problem. It shifts an entry point for the beginning programmer. How do I enter as a brand new programmer? How do I get my name recognition out there on the different freelance marketplaces? How do I start in a small country to make a few bucks? If ChatGPT is going to do this for everyone, how do I make a little bit of extra money on the side? I don't know. There are some people who are going to be cut out, and retraining isn't going to solve it for them.
Well, and folks have talked about you'll use ChatGPT and your ability to craft requests of that engine. It turns out to be your actual skill.
And in the end, you have to decide whether or not what they gave you is good or not.
Yeah.
Back in the early days of programming, I sort of glibly said, maybe the only job left in the world someday will be programmers. I remember Scott Stanfield said, and battery makers. Programmers and battery makers. Those would be the only jobs left. Now I'm thinking, proofreaders might be the only job left someday in the literary world.
Oh, dude, they're being cut in the newspaper business, so I wouldn't even, and publishing business, I wouldn't even count on that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They're one of the first jobs to be cut in publishing.
Yeah, well, it shows.
It does. It really does.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many errors I see. And my wife, Kelly, my wife is very attentive when it comes to details, right? And so she can spot. She also says she should be a continuity person on a movie set.
Same thing. Details.
Nope. Your coffee cup was in your left hand that last shot. You moved it to your right hand. Put it in your left.
Arm was up, not down.
Yeah.
Right. But I wonder if we're I wonder if we have been and are now accelerating down a path of a version of yellow journalism. This idea of the quality, eventually yellow journalism was the time when folks were sensationalizing news back in the broadsheet era. And eventually people stopped reading it because it was garbage. And the industry had to change. And I wonder if we're not on that exact path where it's like, hey, quality matters, and eventually people will ignore it because it's garbage.
Well, I've sat in on a lot of the future of news panels. There's nothing news people love to talk about more than the future of their business.
Yeah, right.
And this has been a topic for as long as I've been involved in the news business, which is like 30 years. Exactly this question. And generally, the consensus is, and has always been, there's not enough division between opinion and news, and there never will be. because
Right.
there's too much money in opinion, and the public doesn't know how to separate the two.
Yeah.
Even when you put opinion at the top of the page or on the chyron at the bottom of the screen, people still think it's news.
But we're talking about an inflection point. This may be part of that inflection point, is to say that we do need to discriminate on these things. It
Yeah.
has happened before.
Yeah.
I cite the yellow journalism case as one of the few cases where it did happen.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, in the last 30 years, all we've seen is the rise of the 24-hour news channel, which is 80% opinion and 20% hard news.
80% advertising, 10% opinion, and 10% news. Yeah.
Well, and lots of repeating
Yeah,
over and over and over
yeah,
again.
it's expensive.
What do you think of Twitter?
Well, God help me.
Yeah. We're kind of feeling that dread too.
I mean, it was such a great language research tool until these new fees. I guess they're not underway quite yet, but these new fees are now threatening a great language research tool.
Yeah.
Where the geocoding on tweets meant that you could actually do really sophisticated, time-based, region-based database searches and say, this term is more common here and less common there, and has
Interesting.
been over the last 10 years or however long Twitter's been, 13 years. How long has Twitter been?
Oh, geez.
16 years?
Yeah, 15 maybe.
15. And so now we have longitudinal data, and it's fantastic for that. And now that's going to be just thrown in the crapper.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't think Twitter's all that important to Elon, actually. I think he's mostly just trying to get out of the situation he's in. I wonder if we're not going to get back to something. But he blew up the revenue model, so he's just trying to scrounge around for revenue.
What a ding dong.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, what a terrible, terrible waste of time.
Yes.
It was a good product.
It was.
Maybe it'll get back there. Maybe you're right. Maybe it will get back there.
Because ultimately, it doesn't bat at the same level as getting people to Mars or inventing the electric car. Why are you wasting time on this?
I just wish he would spend more time with his family.
Yeah.
Yeah, that dude needs a friend, in the worst way.
I'm just saying, out of the public eye. 'Cause he just needs,
Yeah.
he needs attention, and he's got all those people who could give him all the attention he ever wanted.
Yeah, I think he went off the rails when Grimes left. The Elon that was kind of fun, the guy who said, "Let's fly my sports car into space," that kind
was
of
cool.
thing.
Yeah.
That was a great Elon, and that's when he had a significant other around him that was, at least something to reflect against. And since she's been gone, he's just gotten progressively crazier.
Yeah, I don't know enough about his personal life. I just know how, I'm just trying
sad
to keep
that I
it
know
focused
anything.
on the utility of the tool rather than the nature of the man.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
utility of the tool is
Declining.
declining.
Especially for a guy
unfortunately.
like you were saying, a great research tool for language usage.
Oh, it really is. Look at the work by Jack Grieve. If you just type in Jack Grieve, it's Grieve. Just type in Jack Grieve linguist. He's written some phenomenal papers using Twitter and showing African American English online and British English and just different ways you can track regionality using Twitter. It's brilliant stuff. Just brilliant stuff.
Well, and that only works if Twitter is serving as that sort of piazza model where you have a significant portion of the population
That's right.
routinely communicating.
Right. A broad spectrum across all ethnic backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds and political backgrounds.
Right.
But if it's going to shift very far right, we're going to lose that.
Are there any other tools out there that have potential in your mind to be used in the same way someday?
No. Nothing else geocodes like that.
It's interesting.
Not online, as far as I know.
I've not thought of Twitter as all that special until I hear what you do with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. It's because it's not the product that Twitter is. It's a byproduct, but it's an important byproduct.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of the work that we do as linguists and lexicographers is based on byproduct.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I learned years ago to use Google Alerts to track new words because writers, authors, journalists will often tag words that are new to the vocabulary with phrases like also known as or known to police as or referred to by chemists as. So I have 300 or 100 or so expressions. And then following those expressions is a word.
Is a new word.
Yeah, possibly a new word.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you filter for new words?
Yeah.
But no, it's when people are trying to relate that word, you look
Context.
for the relation phrases.
Yeah, and then they'll sometimes define them.
Right.
And so, it's not very successful. I mean, I could probably automate that if I wanted to hire somebody. But, for a while there, I was just reading those alerts and marking down the words that were new to me also. And it was pretty successful. I found thousands and thousands of words that way.
Yeah.
I think you also used Google Books, right? To find and other tools that you have at your disposal to find the first time a word has been seen or a phrase has been seen in print.
Yeah. It's always like, as far as we know, you always have to add that, that caveat, as far as we know. Yep. These days, I more often use archive.org.
Oh, yeah.
Because they have a great new search engine, by the way, that allows date range searches. And although the OCR is kind of iffy, because it uses, I think, a modified version of Tesseract, which is way better than it used to be, but it's still not perfect. And it often depends upon script recognition, which isn't that great. So sometimes it'll misrecognize, for example, Cyrillic as another language. But it's pretty good.
I just found an old website that I used to run and started in 1994, Carl and Gary's VB homepage.
It's where I first ran across you back in the day.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is the books portion of archive.org, and that's where the gold is.
The what portion?
The books portion of archive.org.
Oh.
That's where the gold is.
Yeah, if you're going to donate money to an internet resource, donate to archive.org.
Yeah, I do. It's not a lot, but I give them like $25 a month.
Wow.
That's nice. It's fair.
Because I make such a huge use of their site. And then there's a few software projects, like, since I use OCR in my PDF pretty regularly. So sometimes I'll download something that I don't think was OCR'd very well there, and then I'll run OCR in my PDF on it, which is a great script. It's just wonderful. It's got Tesseract on the back end. It's Python based. You throw a PDF at it, tell it which languages it should OCR with, and it just wonderful things like de-skewing and a little bit of contrast correction. Just fantastic. Just kind of a nice front end for Tesseract to handle some of the real common cases. So it converts from PDF to PDF. Just fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Why do new words emerge? I mean, I could think of a few reasons, but I'd like to hear your version of that.
Well, in your business, you know why they emerge. In the tech business, you get a new product, solves a new problem, and that new problem has a name, right?
Yeah. It's often a silly name like Zing Boing or something.
Well, what I'm talking about, for example, speaking of Elon Musk, what did he create upstairs in the sky? He created
Starlink.
Starlink. And what is Starlink? When you see all those satellites together, it's a mega constellation.
Right.
So that's a new word because he created something that didn't exist before, a mega constellation.
And so you're creating new terms to describe new things.
Yeah, often it is. And it's easier with nouns. And it's easier when you're not creating new senses for verbs. Those are much harder, or new senses for words. Those are much harder to come across and to notice. But generally, it's about the advancement of ideas, culture, people. It's about things changing, and that's when the language has to change too.
I learned so many great terms from listening to yours, like your show, like voluntold is a great one. I've been voluntold.
Anybody who's worked in the military knows that word.
Yeah, that's a great word. And it doesn't require explanation, you know? So many of our 3-letter acronyms, TLAs, are just so baffling to people who aren't in the business that we have to constantly stop and define what we're talking about.
Yeah, we put a show in the can this week that you'll hear in a couple of weeks. Martha and I talked with a caller who was telling us about working with Aussies, people from Australia, and he was talking about how mysterious their language was at first.
Yeah.
And so sometimes language changes just because you have this natural friction with other groups of people. So you pick up how they speak, you know, and it becomes part of your speech. So language change is about osmosis, you know, growth between different groups of people and having to accommodate each other. Accommodation is a real big part of new language. Adoption of other people's speech or adoption of their ways of living. So, for example, on the border between Brazil and all the Spanish-speaking countries around it, there are varieties of language known as Portuñol, which is a mix of Portuguese and Spanish.
Wow.
But they're different depending on which border you're at. Each one of them has kind of created a new Creole, just like the varieties of Spanglish spoken along the Mexico-U.S. border are a little different. So Miami Spanglish is different from Texas Spanglish.
Right. Yeah.
Just because the English brushing up with different kinds of Spanish. They're varied.
When you're banging against different cultures, like if you think about the countries on the northern side of Brazil, like Suriname and Guyana, they've got some strong French influences too.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the same reason that the Quebecois French is different from, say, Martinique French in the Caribbean.
For sure. Well,
the other thing I wanted to say is like in the tech world, so the jargon of, say, people who work in cloud services versus people who do frontline support, they're both in tech, but they're different flavors of tech. So they're going to have some overlap, but they're still going to have different lingo. They might have different lingo for the same stuff. How they talk about customers, for example, or how they talk about service calls.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced that what's happening with the large language models is going well enough that it's going to continue. We may be thrown into a winter. Like I think the whole move with Bing was a PR play. I think that the most important part what stimulated all this was 100 million users signing up for ChatGPT.
You think it's a money grab?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even think it's a money grab. I think it's a PR play. I think Bing was in the single digits of use as a search engine. And then ChatGPT comes along. We now have evidence, they've made posts and things talking about they had been tinkering with a language model attached to a search engine for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. They weren't happy with it. It wasn't good enough. And then ChatGPT comes out, signs up 100 million users in 2 months. They're like, that's more people than are using Bing. Let's put it out there. And then Google freaks out and takes the bait.
I wonder how long it's going to be before Amazon Alexa has that sort of contextual memory that it does not really currently have now.
I don't know. Alexa has turned out to be a real money sink for Amazon. Something like $10 billion put into it, and it looks like a failing portion of their business.
Well, all of those voice bots all at the same time. I mean, it's coming into 2023 where we have a threat of an economic downturn. I don't know that we actually have one. We have a threat of one. It's become very stylish for tech companies to lay people off and so forth. They're clearly scrutinizing their businesses and wanting and signaling they're going to cut things that aren't working. And both Google Home and their voice device and Amazon Alexa both were supposed to make money and didn't, to the tune of billions. And so they're making noises. I don't know if they've actually done anything, but they've made noises about winding it down.
Yeah, exactly what I've been reading. Because from my perspective, as somebody who hosts a radio show and podcast, I'm always interested in how many listeners can tune into my show on those devices. And it's incredibly hard to make it happen. Because there are, unfortunately, my show is called Away with Words, and there are a zillion songs and other podcasts that either have episodes or portions of their programming called Away with Words.
Yeah.
And the wrong thing comes.
Dude, we have a podcast that starts with a period.
Oh, God.
It's silly.
It is really hard.
Whose idea was that anyway?
And a surprising number of people create new shows constantly called Away with Words without checking to see if there's another show already called that. People do not think.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's not good for them either. I mean, so I find that you have to be very explicit with the one who starts with A. You have to say, play the latest episode of the podcast Away with Words with Grant Barrett and Martha Barnett.
Yes,
and then it will.
But people don't do that.
No, they don't do that. Because speech is supposed to be easy. Obviously, it's supposed to be efficient. I'm supposed to be able to say very little and you should understand what I'm talking about.
How far do you think we are from the way it works in movies or Star Trek to speaking to the computer and having it all be understood?
I think we can't even see our way there right now because we don't have real understanding coming from the machine of intent or any of those things. I think it's almost like we're in the same space that Tesla is with the autopilot. You've made something that feels like it should exist. It has science fiction context, so people want to believe it exists. Mm-hmm. And so you ignore how very broken it actually is.
Right. That's exactly, you put it into the words that I was trying to say. That's exactly how I feel about it.
And I wonder if it won't be thrown into a winter because it deserves to be.
I like that expression too. Thrown into a winter where it just everything chills for a while.
Yeah. Put it on ice.
Well, It's kind of like what happened with electric cars. Electric cars were big at the beginning of the automobile era. And how long did they lay in the deep freeze?
Yeah.
For decades. And then they, a little poke up in the 80s, in the 70s with the oil crisis, and then they went away again. And a little poke up in the 90s, and then it went away again. And then the crazy billionaire showed up.
People are going to yell at me for saying lay instead of lie, just so you know.
There you go. But
they should lighten up, Grant.
It's contextual to us because of the artificial intelligence winters, right? The phrase artificial intelligence first comes up in the 50s with Martin Minsky working for the military. They get some stuff to work, but their promises are way out of scope. And so winter. Then it reappears as the expert systems in the 70s. And they build these $30,000 computers and sold several thousand of them, but that's about it. Winter. Then in the 90s with the decision tree systems and Deep Blue and so forth and playing chess. And it can't get further than that. Winter. And then it comes up again in the 2011s with Jeffrey Hinton's model and ImageNet and vision recognition systems. And that's what we're at the tail end of this right now. Hinton's now saying, here comes another winter. But, the big change now is we have the cloud. So we have this huge amount of compute hanging around and companies highly motivated to find work for their cloud.
Clouds are full of rain.
The kicker to all this OpenAI stuff and ChatGPT and all these things all consume cloud.
I have a story for you, Grant. Do you remember a program back when we were all young called Eliza?
Yes, I played with Eliza. I had the Mac version. Yeah.
Yeah, the Rogerian psychotherapist. You basically would ask it a question, and it would answer with a question that contained parts or was triggered by your question.
Yes. Yeah, you can still find it online. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll include a link to an online one.
So you would say a sentence that included my brother, right? And so it picked up on those keywords and said, tell me more about your family. And my first experience of this was, oh my God, it's brilliant. It's a genius. But here's the thing. The guy who wrote that originally wrote it as a goof against the term artificial intelligence to prove that it wasn't intelligent. It was simply doing a lookup of keywords and responding with responses appropriate for those keywords. And everybody kind of, including me as a kid, I was blown away by this. And I actually rewrote it in Visual Basic a long time ago. And I think I might have even done an online version of it, but I was just fascinated by it. From a consumer standpoint, it looked like magic to me. Yeah.
People want to believe these things exist, right? I mean, between pareidolia and anthropomorphization, like we're looking for faces and we cast humanity on things that aren't human.
I'm not the first to say this, but we are terribly bad at pattern matching and we just think we're fantastic.
Yeah. Right. The pattern we match is I'm a genius.
Nice.
But I am.
Yeah. Well, what? In your case, we're making an exception, but
no, I'm not. I always say that I'm somewhere in the middle, just a little bit above average.
So
like Woebegone, I guess.
Yeah. And the other thing we know about humans is when they don't understand something or there's ambiguity, we make stuff up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
We make stuff up and it always blames someone but us.
Right. So go read a book
or a bunch of books.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Sure.
While I have you here. What are you working on? What do you do besides this podcast?
Well, I can tell you. Well, first of all, Richard's working on a book about the history of .NET.
Okay.
Microsoft's. You probably know what .NET is.
Yeah. I only have the like open source version of it installed, but yeah.
Right. So it goes back to being a Windows only product back in the 2000s and went all the way through tablets and phones and open source. And he can tell you more about that. But I'm basically a web developer, and I've got a couple of YouTube videos series. One on Blazor, which is the state of the art web UI technology, and another one on Maui, which is their mobile technology. So my job is essentially to come up with good examples of how to use this stuff every week, do some research, write some code, and then do a video about it. So this is my wheelhouse. I love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm working on a book too. It's on the word suck, S-U-C-K, suck.
Is there a whole book there?
Yeah. Well, it'll be a short one, 30,000 words, but yeah.
A mirror.
It won't be on. It'll be like on the
Does
figurative uses of it, like "you suck" or "that sucks." Or,
No, we have
"Go suck an egg."
we have a version of it that's a noun, right? So
The big suck, right?
well, we turn down the suck and we turn up the awesome in our production. That's
yeah, exactly.
yeah. We have the suck knob.
Yeah, I will be addressing that noun. Yes.
Turn it down.
I appreciate that.
Grant, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And keep in touch, will you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. This was a great conversation. It's nice to flex the tech brain a little bit.
Yeah. And again, it was a really good intersection of all these things and at the right time, I think. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the way with words.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Be well, you guys.
All right. Bye-bye. And we'll talk to you, dear listener, next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a